Hello and welcome to the newest installment of your favorite series, Copernicus Development Logicus. Hello party people, if you're new here, welcome, and if you're returning, two men walk into a bar. I spent the last 30 days pouring my soul into the development of an independent video game. This indie game is called Cavern, and it's about caves. It's a roguelike where you gain mastery over every aspect of the game as you play, allowing you to swap things out at your will or leisure. You can wishlist the game on Steam. In this video, I'll give you some insight into exactly what I spent my 30 days on, and you can see the process from idea to product and judge for yourself how I did. The main 5 things I got up to this month are better dungeon generation, so room placement, the player gaining more things to emit, so new projectiles, general bullet systems for arcing or homing bullets, enemy pathfinding throughout the grid, so as the terrain changes, the enemies can still path to you, and lastly, upgrade changes to the graphics and the display to make them look super cool and yummy and like you want to get them. The video has chapters in the description, so if any of these sound interesting to you, you can skip around the video as you'd like. Also, just to preface, I've been working on this game for the past 5 months, so this is just one of those 5 months. So let's talk about new dungeon generation. The way the original dungeon generation worked was I would just make one big square room and then fill it with walls to make a sort of room structure. But what I found was it didn't feel like you were going anywhere really. And I wanted the cave to feel more maze-like and winding. So I came up with a new system where I would generate rooms and then lay them out next to each other. Some long rooms, some small rooms, some large rooms, etc. And then I would fill them in the same way I had been filling in the big room, just on a smaller scale. To place the rooms, it's pretty simple. I just come up with a room height and width, and then I move the room along one of the cardinal directions, a certain offset. The offset is just half the previous room's width or height, plus half this room's width or height. So that offsets it so that they are perfectly next to each other. Then I just make sure it's not overlapping with any other rooms, and then I move on to the next room. The algorithm can also decide to fork the map and create a sort of offshoot by picking a new room to start from. This makes the game more maze-like as well. After I'm done placing the rooms, I create the outer boundary which the player can't pass through. Then I fill the rooms with walls, and I just need to make sure that the walls and outer boundary don't block off the rooms from one another. I know which rooms are next to each other because of the way I'm generating them, and I also do another check to see if any rooms ended up next to each other, just by chance. This way the level layouts can create a loop of rooms, making it a little bit more confusing. The player always had the ability to emit projectiles. Currently, the player emits this energy bullet. I wanted the player to be able to scroll through objects that they're allowed to emit. So I made this cool scrolling UI for picking out the object. It just shows you the next 5 objects on deck. And then when you stop on a type, it shows the type's name as well. I also added this reloading graphic that is interchangeable. So for the robot, it's a little power symbol, but for the archer character, it'll be a little bow and arrow. The player gains more emitting upgrades by going to the cave instruments. So you can acquire either a new swap ability or a new emit ability. Then you can emit an object of that type. Something interesting here is that you can gain an emit and a swap ability for the same type. Say for example you have the ability to swap the fire bullet and you also have the ability to emit the fire bullet, you can start generating infinite amounts of any other object you can swap to, for example, infinite bombs. This is a cool little emergent feature of these systems interacting. The next thing I needed to do was new bullet systems. I want bullets that are able to arc or home. Bullet arcing is easy. All you have to do is have the bullet travel along its Z direction and then rotate it slowly. So I can rotate it left or right at a certain speed. I can increase that speed so its curve is exponential. I can change the direction over time so it's more of a sine wave. All of these things aren't really that practical, but hopefully I'll be able to come up with some interesting functions for them. For example, I want to make a wizard that no matter what bullet you fire, applies some randomness to it. I think the wizard character will be sort of chaotic. It's funny that when you shoot a bullet, you don't really know where it's going. It could hit something you really need. It could hit an enemy at the perfect time. I also got homing working. This will be an upgrade that the player can receive that gives all their emitted projectiles homing. Some projectiles will have homing automatically, like maybe a heat-seeking missile or things like that, but I'll use it sparingly in the game. The next major category is enemy pathfinding. Enemy pathfinding was pretty easy. I use A-star pathfinding, which is built into Godot. I just create a list of nodes and then connect them. The enemies then find a path to the target and move in that direction. I needed an enemy to test the pathfinding with, so I made this small caveman. It's more of a rock, but the small formation moves and attacks when it's near the player. The small formation will path around obstacles and will be alerted when it can see the player by line of sight. When it loses the player, it goes into a patrolling mode and it will just path around to a node on the A-star graph that is relatively close to it. Another interesting thing that I added to the small formation was the ability to dodge. So I want enemies that can dodge projectiles. And the way I did this was just add an offset direction to the movement while it's pathing. It adds an influence direction to the movement based on the way that the projectile is currently moving. It goes perpendicular to a moving projectile, or just away from anything static that it wants to avoid. I also use the dot product when calculating if the bullet is moving away from us or towards us. And to make it feel more natural, I add a check that makes sure the enemy can sort of see the bullet by checking the dot product between the way the enemy is facing and its relative position to the bullet itself. This all adds up to make a pretty good dodging system. It's not 100% reliable, but I don't want enemies that can juke everything the player throws at them. The last category here is changes to the upgrades. I had shown the upgrade chest in the last video, but it was green. I like the green color, but I thought something that stood out more would be better. I made it have this rainbow effect, as well as on the label itself. And then the same for the upgrade, a rainbow outline, as well as a rainbow highlight. I also made this upgrade display that will show which artifacts you've collected in the game, so you can reference it during your playthrough to see how you're doing, or what you need to strategize around. I gave the image the same rainbow outline when you hover over it, and then, to test it all out, I set off to make a new upgrade. The new upgrade that I made is called the Welder. It shoots a spark, which is a type of projectile with a short range, out in a random direction after you emit. So if you have a lot of reduced cooldown, you can emit a ton of sparks. This will also synergize with homing, where every emitted projectile gains homing. I think this makes for a pretty cool synergy, and I like the way the graphic with the little welder spark turned out as well. My plan is to release a nice demo at the beginning of June, so if you're interested in that, wishlist the game on Steam. I need to make the Steam page better as well, make a nice logo, things like that. I have a pretty full plate, but I've been working on my friend Calvin's game as well, doing some art. He's been on the channel in this video where we did a game jam and made a 3D platformer. He's got this really cool idea about an auto battler where you craft items to build up a character, sort of Dungeons and Dragons style, and then you fight against everyone who's ever won at that tier in the database to try to be the best in the world. It's posted on itch if you're interested to play it, and he's constantly improving it. The game is really fun. I find myself just playing it randomly. I think the art is turning out pretty cool, so if you're interested in that, please go check it out and leave him a comment about what you think. Eventually he'll have a Steam page up. You'll be able to wishlist that game as well. Thanks for checking out these devlogs. There's a whole playlist on my channel of the current progress so far for the past 4 months. Please leave me a comment if you have any ideas or suggestions for the game. Sayonara. Until next time, I'm here to give you a special crystal. Take this crystal to gain eternal life. This life, though, won't be without trouble. eternal as it may be, this life will be full of tragedy and evil.